seeing what that can do just made me realize that if I keep sticking with Excel, I'll get outdated pretty quickly. When you're seeing that evolution happen in front of your eyes, I wouldn't even call it a risk. To me, it was a risk to not actually go and learn data science. I got one offer, and then that was already a good offer, and I was considering already accepting it. But right in the same week, I heard back from two more companies and got two more offers. So now I went from the problem of not knowing if I'll get offers to like, how do I pick the right one? I hope everyone has this problem.
In today's episode, we have Dilyan, head of machine learning and analytics engineering at Treasure Data and an alumni of Flatiron, which is a data science bootcamp. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Felix.
Yeah. So first of all, you were working in finance and in tech and digital advertising and had a pretty stable career before transitioning into machine learning and data science. Why take the risk to switch careers into machine learning and data science? Like, what did you see there?
It was kind of a natural progression, especially someone like me who started before ML data science was really mainstream. So as you can imagine, a lot of people in finance, I mean, they still actually use spreadsheets for a lot of their financial models. If you've started that early and you've done analytics and data processing and data gathering in things like Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that, once you start exposed to doing things with like Python and SQL and via APIs and just like the power of technology, you see that that's the way of the future. So what made me make the shift is basically doing that type of work a lot in Excel for many, many years, then switching to digital advertising where I was running advertising campaigns, but still was asking usually data science teams or data engineering teams to pull data from me using like SQL and then to run some kind of regressions for me and things like that. So seeing what that can do just made me realize that if I keep sticking with Excel, I'll get outdated pretty quickly. Plus, I also just realized that that's something that's extremely interesting to me. It wasn't just a fear of getting obsolete or falling behind. It was also like exciting what technology can do. And when you're seeing that evolution happen in front of your eyes, I wouldn't even call it a risk. To me, it was a risk to not actually go and learn data science. That would have been a risk to actually keep sticking with Excel and keep doing what I was doing before. So yeah.
Yeah. And, even with a career change, when you see the writing on the wall that this is the future, and if you don't make this shift, you'll be left behind. Did you still have any like fears or doubts about whether you could do it or not? Like, I think a lot of listeners might
Yeah.
see the same thing. What was going through your head?
Well, here's where I mean, of course, there's always fear and uncertainty, and it depends on your level of savings and how much time you think you can spend in this transition without having to worry about the next paycheck. So that's a huge factor. So I think careful approach and planning ahead is important. So the way I did it wasn't like, I'll leave my job and just see what happens. My transition was through Flatiron School. So just to provide some context, the way that works is you have to do about a 1 month data science course online before you're accepted the program and pass a bunch of tests and exercises and complete like a final project. And if you can do that successfully, they actually will interview. And then if after the interview, they feel like you're a good fit, you get into the program. At the same time, that program also had a money back guarantee. If you don't get a job within a certain amount of months after graduations. I did that course while I was still working. So I decided I will do the course and see how I feel about it. And that course allowed me to realize if this is really something that I have a passion for and that I also like understand and will be good at. And it's something that I want to invest the long run. And it was through that 1 month course and the interview where I got more confidence that this is going to work, learning about the money back guarantee also allowed me not to worry so much about paying for the program and not making any money in the meantime. Of course, I had saved up enough so I could go through the about 4.5 boot camp. And then you probably have to account for a few months of job search as well. Having enough finances to support yourself during that period is important because otherwise you're just not going to be focused. You're not going to be sleeping well. And, if you're trying to work and do the boot camp at the same time, you probably won't be able to learn as well. So I do recommend at least some kind of proper planning than taking complete risk. But yeah, at the end of
Yeah.
the day, we always don't know if it's going to work out. But luckily for me, it did.
Yeah. The planning helps you build this confidence. And it's not so much about the confidence to do it, but then also make sure your mindset is right while you are in this intensive
Exactly.
4-month program. But what about like friends or families or colleagues? Are they expressing skepticism about your decision? I think, and this is the thing that the audience runs into where they think it's the right thing to do, but then everyone is saying like,
Yeah.
you're taking a big risk. Like, what was your experience?
I would say in my case, there was a little bit of both. I was lucky enough to have people very close to me that were really supporting that decision and were good, like moral support. But of course, there's also family that kind of doesn't understand why would you leave like an established career and like what is this technology and how, when are you going to get a job? So, I think that at the end of the day, when you do get a job in tech, usually like the pay and the prospects are most of the time better than what you were doing before. Even the people who kind of are fearful and doubt that decision, as long as you do land a job and kind of start in this industry, once they find out that it all worked out, they're happy for you. So that's how it worked out. But for sure, my parents in this case, they're kind of worried. But at the same time, I'm also like a little bit older. I'm not fresh out of college. So they had some confidence that I've been successful in other areas. So they knew that I wouldn't just completely fail. But there's always some worry for sure.
So yeah, you mentioned like you saw the future that was up ahead. At that time, did you feel like it was possibly too late to make the switch, or the industry's getting too saturated that you're late to the party? Did you have any of those kind of feelings?
Yeah, great question. So timing is huge, of course, in anything like that. So I'm glad you asked that question because I don't want listeners listening to this now to really compare my experience with theirs. I think at this point in time, I do know that there's a lot more boot camps, there's a lot more saturation. At the same time, market's not doing as well. So I think it's a more difficult switch these days. But again, learning the right technologies and timing is important. So again, to provide more context, I was in the second ever data science cohort of Flatiron, meaning that I started in 2018 and graduated early 2019. So that was before COVID, that was before the crazy tech boom, but it was like a little bit before. So really, really perfect timing because gave me enough time to get into the industry before the boom. And by the time it was kind of, booming, I was already on that track. When you hit the right timing, then there's growth. And I'm still at the same company that I started right after Flatiron, 5 years after. And I've been able to grow within the company, start my own data science team, which, I'm sure we can talk about that further, just to show the importance of timing in this case. So what advice can I give to listeners? Meaning that, okay, the timing is different now. You can't probably just go to data science bootcamp and be guaranteed a job. But an advice I would have here is that even in today's market, if you combine your passion, what you learn with data science, with some kind of domain knowledge that you have in a specific industry, or generative AI is right now, like that's the big hype, right? So maybe focus on specific algorithms and focus on specific courses that will give you the knowledge and the skills that actually capture the timing of what is right now hot and what is booming. Because back then it was just like, can you code in Python? Can you do data engineering? And can you like build all sorts of machine learning models? Like back in 2018, if you could do that, there's plenty of jobs available. Now a lot of people have that baseline data science knowledge. So you have to be a little more specialized with your skills and target like things that will separate you from the pack.
Hey, hope you're enjoying this episode. Just want to hop in real quick to let you know that if you want to learn more from Dillian and this interview, we put together a resource kit that details the resources that Dillian recommends, a step by step to get where he's at today, the interview transcript, a summary, and cliff notes of this interview, the tips and advice on getting your first job as a data scientist or machine learning engineer, all for free. All you gotta do is go sign up for the email list that's in the description of this video. And that's it. All right, back to the interview. Yeah, that makes sense that it started off as anyone that you could be a generalist and you can
Yeah.
come in, but now because it's becoming a bit more saturated, you have to specialize. And you mentioned this, the other scientists and machine learning engineers have mentioned this to me too, which is that now you have to pair it with some kind of domain knowledge. I think this is very similar to software engineering as well, where the job market today, they're almost looking to hire people that have already done the job that they are looking to bring in right now, at least. Like maybe the market will change over time, but it seems like specialization is even more important now than ever. Want to rewind now to back to 2018 when you joined Flatiron School. You mentioned it was like a 4 month intensive program. Did you feel like it was comfortable or was it challenging?
It was challenging. I wouldn't say it was comfortable, but by challenging, I mean, it was just a grind, right? Long hours. That's what you're doing every day. You're not going out. You're not seeing friends for 4 months. At the same time, it was exciting and I was learning. So I was not like stressed or unhappy, but the level of effort was challenging just to keep that up for 4.5 months. A lot of projects, a lot of labs, a lot of new stuff you're learning every day. Sometimes two, three new algorithms, and yeah, it's a lot to take in nonstop without much break.
Was there any moments throughout where you like question your decision, like, am I going to make it through this? Or did you feel like you're definitely going to get out and eventually get a job? And how confident were you there?
I don't think I personally had such moments throughout. Once I graduated, and we can get into that, there was a little bit of a transition between graduating and actually getting some interviews and getting traction on the job search. So there was a little bit of after, but during it, you're so busy and you're so excited. And it's a big group. I think we were, I don't know, I'm just going to guess, but probably over 20, maybe 30 people. And it was in person, right? That was very important. There was a whole community there, and you see other people doing the same thing, and you talk in the lunch breaks, and you make friends, you learn people's reasons for doing this, and you see people coming from all sorts of industries. And I think having that kind of community really helped. We still have a core group of our cohort that are good friends, and we like take trips together and we hang out. So it really was almost like going back to college and just building these good college relationships, and then you make like friends for life. At the same time, they have the program is really good. They have things at the end of each week, time allocated just for talking about personal struggles, doubts. They assure you you can talk about these things at the end of the week if you've had a tough week or if you're struggling. So it wasn't just learning code. There was also kind of like a mentorship component that I think really helped people sharing their experiences. There are people that start their job searches during the program. Some people started getting interviews. I think maybe a couple of people landed a job before graduating. So all of that helps give you confidence because you see it working for other people. It's not just you by yourself with your own fears and doubts. And that helps a lot.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had a support group, you had friends and other colleagues in the program that were landing jobs. Like, tell us more about your experience. Like, how long did it take? First of all, how long did it take to get your first interview? Like, what was that process like?
I don't even remember how long it took me to get a first interview just from code applying. That was tough. There was a lot of like just sending hundreds of applications or whatever on all sorts of platforms and not hearing back. But that's kind of standard. We all know a lot of these applications are screened by algorithms now, and hiring managers are busy. They just sometimes skim through your resume, and yeah, they see someone came from a boot camp and they're looking for someone more experienced. They will just gonna glance your resume, even if you have good projects and great skills, they might miss that. So code applying is tough. Fortunately, again, Flatiron had career services post graduation thing because they guaranteed your money back if you don't get a job. There was a post graduation process, and you work with a coach and a career mentor, and they have relationships with companies where they're able to actually get you to interviews. And they have a career services event where companies come and conduct interviews on campus. Through those interviews, that's where I got my first interviews and my first few like kind of getting into late rounds with companies. Definitely, if you have connections or ways to make connections with people outside of code applying, that's a lot more effective. So I would say most of my interviews I got through either connections from previous industry that I contacted and said, hey, I took a break to learn machine learning and I'm really excited. And, I want the opportunity to like work with interesting data and interesting projects. So reaching out to people is really important, and using any kind of connections you have, because direct applying has a very low, I think, success rate with hearing back. Especially if
Mhm.
you're, like you said, if you're not someone who's already done this and has all the experience, and if that's not what, yeah, if it's not obvious that you're like a strong candidate.
Yeah. So what about the job interviews themselves? Like, were they hard? Did you pass all of them? Were there failures along the way? What was that experience like?
Yeah, they were definitely hard. Definitely didn't pass all of them. They went through a lot of interviews for different positions. So it really, when there wasn't like a match of the expectations, I think like passing first round was a lot more successful, obviously. But then when you get to more technical stuff, there was people that I talked to in teams where even I knew during the interview that like I'm not there yet. Like they're looking for someone a lot more advanced,
Mhm.
but it's still a good experience because you learn about things that more technical folks ask on these interviews, and you realize like that to get to that point you need to secure something that's going to allow you to have the experience to learn all these things. And then maybe you go back and you apply to that job. So having a mix of difficult interviews, I think was very useful to kind of fine tune maybe the interviews where you should go at harder because you understand where it's really worth spending your time. And some interviews just became more of like learning experience, but you kind of expected to fail. Yeah,
Yeah, and you probably got better at them over time.
for
And you
sure.
mentioned that there were sometimes you just can't. It's not about the interview itself, but you actually have to go back and maybe improve your portfolio or improve your resume or like change things outside the interview. Do you remember any changes or improvements that you made in your interviewing process that helped you do better in these interviews?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we spoke about domain knowledge. That's the main shift that I made that really increased the success rate. It was about not applying to everything across the board, but trying to find opportunities where either I had domain knowledge from working in these industries before. As part of Flatiron, we did 5 projects and one major project. And I try to pick opportunities where one of the projects that I did is in some way relevant or interesting to the people who are interviewing me or the industry. So it's trying to find that link where you either connect with the industry or the job or the person. So looking up people on LinkedIn, definitely my advice is like definitely look people up. Don't tell them you look them up. Don't make it too obvious. But for example, I would see someone's going to interview me and I see in their write up that they were a soccer coach or they were a math tutor. And so, I used to be a soccer coach or math tutor. So somewhere in the interview or in the way I'm talking about data, I might make a metaphor or reference to being a tutor or to mathematics. And then they would be like, oh, me too. And then you have like a more open, casual conversation. Sometimes making connection with the person can be even more important than talking about your skills. If you have the skills that are required, then it's assumed that most of the candidates would have the baseline skills that are required for a job. It's in those moments where you can share the main knowledge or maybe show how you're a cultural fit or how you can connect with the team is what's going to make you stand out and maybe have people consider you for the final rounds.
Yeah, and it's not really that much to go a little bit above the kind of expectations for interviewee, like you mentioned, like just looking on LinkedIn or trying to match the domain expertise that you have. Maybe it wasn't specifically in data science or machine learning, but you might have exposure to a particular industry and like really try to highlight those things. And it's funny that you mentioned that sometimes you try to find some kind of personal connection. And I think that it's so effective that I think some companies, especially the bigger companies, will train interviewers to try to avoid running into those situations to make it much more, I guess, rote or clinical in the interview
For sure.
process. So it
Yeah.
works. If the company allows for that, it definitely works to have some kind of personal connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure this period of time between the end of the boot camp and you getting your job for like an eternity, but it really is just a month. But still, a month is a long time where you're looking for a job like full time basically. So you finally received your offer about a month after the job search. Take us back to that moment. Like what emotions was going through your head when you got the offer letter? Like how did it feel to achieve this milestone?
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, before I go into depth about the specific offer that I accepted, I was fortunate enough to end up with 3 offers around the same time. And what I want to point out, just to close our previous point, is that 2 of the offers were in the digital advertising industry and one was in finance. And this is where my previous background is. So it just showed that domain knowledge was extremely important. And so, of course, when you get your first offer, you're really excited because even within that month or a month and a half, whatever it is, it definitely felt like eternity. It feels longer than it is always when you're going through that job search. So I got one offer and then that was already a good offer. And I was considering already accepting it, but right in the same week, I heard back from 2 more companies and got 2 more offers. So now I went from the problem of not knowing if I'll get offers to like, how do I pick the right one, right? So I hope everyone has this problem, but for me, a key factor was in the offer that I picked was the technology and the product and what the company was doing. I think I saw the most potential in it. It was innovative. It was something that was needed and didn't exist, while the other two companies were more established big companies, but it was less of an innovative, less of a startup environment, more like, oh, you're in a big company, you have like one task, that's what you'll be doing. And I've already been doing that. So I think I was looking for something where I could add more value and have more flexibility to learn. And I was actually more open to working longer hours and wearing more hats because I wanted to break through into this industry. So I chose the opportunity where I thought I could just learn more and have more opportunity for growth. And at the same time, another big decision, deciding factor was that the company, the treasury data offered me to work fully remote. They're based on the West Coast and I live on the East Coast. So the other two jobs at the time, that was before COVID. So no one, like very few companies were allowing remote work. So the remote work was huge for me. I just made some calculations about how much time I would be saving from commuting and all of that and realized that like, it's a lot of time. I don't remember the exact calculation, but I would have had to commute to New York on the Metro North. And I think it was around like 3 to 4 hours a day, door to door on average, and then 100 and whatever hours a month. And then that's like a lot of hours that you can do productive stuff with. So it was the remote work that
Mhm.
really also made the deciding factor.
Yeah, I just have to point out how much of a data-driven approach you took to figuring out how much to assign a value to the remote's benefit. So learning this remote, being able to work remotely, which are important benefits and to some degree intangible, but you were able to quantify it. But you also indicate to us that the salary change was also significant when you're becoming a data scientist and machine learning engineer, not just in that given offer, but then like the future like trajectory of your career. How did that, like, change your life? Were you able to do anything differently now that you're in, like, this new career, making more money? The prospect of, increased salary has gone up as well?
It's a great question. I haven't actively thought about the financial aspect. I mean, over time, for sure, that gives you more freedom to do things that you weren't able to do before, as well as just not worrying as much about money. I think in a way actually allows to perform better your job because you're not stressed. At some previous jobs, sometimes I felt like I had to do side gigs or work on weekends. A lot of people do that these days. Just being able to focus on my job and on learning and on growing and not worrying about living paycheck to paycheck. I think that that kind of financial freedom is important. It is kind of like a vicious cycle sometimes where you want to break out of the paycheck to paycheck life, but you're also so stuck grinding and hustling to maintain that you never make that mental space and that like, you never open up the time and the, like you said, the mindset to actually pursue something that will give you that more like financial freedom. So breaking out of that is a blessing and it definitely, allows us to focus more on growth and then it all just works out from there. So it's just
Mhm.
getting to that part that really hard and sometimes takes a lot of luck and the right timing and it's definitely not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost equate a career change like this to an escape velocity where you gotta put a lot of effort into it
Yeah,
just to kinda get out of this orbit of paycheck to paycheck where you're struggling, where you don't have the time to study and
exactly.
just kinda cram it in, and then eventually once you achieve escape velocity and you're, in space, I guess, or in some other orbit, you just have a lot more bandwidth, and it almost become like a flywheel where, like, which I never heard someone describe, but it makes a lot of sense where if you're not so much worried about paycheck to paycheck or survive, you can actually have energy and less stress and more mind share to focus on whatever you want. And it could be a career, it could be anything else, but just that freedom that comes with it is sometimes not something people think about, but then it's very real once you go through it or experience it. So you mentioned earlier too about how some of your parents or family and friends were a bit worried about this for you. Do you remember how they reacted when you finally got the job and like they knew about it? Maybe people saw on LinkedIn or heard you announce it somewhere else. How did they react?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely generally positive. It was a while ago now, 5 years ago. So I don't remember so much the immediate reactions except for like happy for you and congratulations. But I do remember the more recent reactions where I think the bigger reactions came 2, 3 years in when I was growing within the company. I was getting promoted. I was being successful, you know, getting raises in my salary and all that. That's when I think, especially parents were like, wow, this is like really working. Like I can't believe where you are now, 2, 3 years later. So I think it takes some time to turn doubters into believers. But yeah, eventually you definitely get a lot of recognition and it makes it all worth it. You do remember the struggles and you hear that a lot about a lot of successful people that at certain point in their life taking risks, whether it's actors or, you always hear about the struggling musician just driving from a gig to a gig, sleeping in their car. And then mm, 3 years later, somehow they're Lady Gaga.
Against
And
the,
they,
yeah,
yeah,
the 10-year overnight success,
right.
story.
Exactly. The 10-year
Yeah.
overnight success. Yeah.
Speaking of like this kind of inspiring journey you went on, I'm sure other friends or maybe former colleagues that were in the same shoes that you were in saw that you made it and they wanted to do it too. But me, I think a lot of people in the back of their mind, you kind of mentioned this earlier about this idea of like thinking, is it too late for me? Not just like maybe it could be too late because the industry is saturated, or too late because I'm, too old for it, or what if I fail? I have all of these like commitments and everything. Like, any advice for people that have those specific kind of doubts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, let me remember exact age I was when I made the switch because that might be like, hopefully will be inspiring some people. But 2018, I was 36. So, for some people that's considered quite late in your career. And there were people in the cohort even older than me and everyone got their jobs and everyone is doing great. So the older you are, the more like, I think I don't think the issue is if you're old. I think the issue is that the older you are, sometimes the more responsibility you might have, like children, or you might be stuck in whatever routine and relationships you have where you don't have as much free time. So I think that is maybe a challenge just to make the time and to give yourself the independence to maybe you have to break out of your friend circle. Like I said, you're not going out for 4 months. So let's say you have kids. Well, you gotta make sure you have a good partner or family who can like help with taking care of your kids while you're doing that. But I think if that's something you have a passion for and if you pursue it with enough persistence and you work hard, I don't think age really matters. I'm not just saying this because like it worked out for me. I've seen it across the industry. I interview people really with technology. I mean, I don't think it's just technology, but if you have the passion, the skill set, and you understand the domain and you're like know how to solve problems, if you can communicate well with people, age really shouldn't matter. It's about whether you have the right mindset and the right skill set to add value to whatever you're trying to switch to. So just believe in yourself and listen to your gut and also again domain knowledge, like whatever you pursue, make sure that it paired with something you understand or something that you believe in. Even if you're making complete switch to a new industry, know why you're switching within yourself. Don't just switch because they pay more money or because you heard that someone's doing well. That might not work out. But if you have some kind of a connection and there's some kind of intrinsic belief or experience, or you have some kind of a moral reason, maybe you always worked in whatever insurance, but now you want to learn technology to maybe provide more clean water and fresh air for certain, that switch would work out because you really are switching to something you believe in. And there is need for that in the world. There is need for more people to do things with their skills, with their knowledge that are not always focused on profit and more money. So whatever your passion is, maybe your passion is money and the market and you just want to make billions, but as long as you're determined and that's something you want to do for the long run, it's going to work for you because that's going to keep you motivated to keep pushing, keep believing, because you have that inner drive and inner belief that is really coming from within you. It's not coming from an external source.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on, and that the career journey is very personal, and you can't just look at someone else's success and say, what, that's going to work for me too. You really got to spend time thinking if the motivations come from external sources or something more internally driven. So, thank you so much for your time, Dillian. Thank you for coming on and sharing your journey, your advice, and experience with us.
Thank you, Felix. It was a pleasure, and I hope this helps at least a handful of young people, or like we said, people of all ages, anyone who's willing to take the leap and get to a better place in their career and in their life.